TheoWarner, this is Yusefaltahir at my channel. I had a channel formerly known, well, it's still up, I just didn't take it down, called John the Hut Dweller. As you may know, John the Hut Dweller was a 3rd century Christian. There were supposed to be 2 other people on there with me, so you have a singular name with a multiplicity of 3, illusion of the Trinity. I stopped that for multiple reasons, one of them being I would give my own personal views or even politics or going off subject of Eastern Orthodoxy, and I'd get people saying, like, John the Hut Dweller says this, he's a fucking idiot, this and that, which I'm not going to be the one responsible for the slandering of saints' name who I actually respect and that my church actually venerates. So I came up with, I just put my own name, Yusefaltahir, which those names are part of my name. I come from a very ethnic background, so I have 3 last names, so it's not my very last name, so I can't get the trolls trying to track me down and stuff, even though they still try to. This debate that you got into with Billzybobb was one that was shown to me by Gambler, who is Eastern Orthodox. He's a friend of mine who we do roundtable discussions with David P. Witham. And talking to Billzybobb is like beating your head against a wall. There's no capacity for listening. And I don't know what fruit this can possibly bear. I think you've had enough experience with them. The first video that I made on here was actually rational atheists are needed for people like Billzybobb. That's why I was so pleased to see people like Big Lundy, Cardinal Virtues, and Skeptical Heretic, even Coughlin and Noel Plum come out and say this guy's insane. I also want to give you some background information. Because Billzybobb kept trying to use the Bible as the Bible is Christianity or the Bible is God, this very Western view of God. The first video I made towards Billzybobb was commending him for attacking this very fundamentalist view of Christianity. I said, except this does not include the historic church. This does not include Eastern Orthodoxy. I can't say I believe in heaven or hell, because the Orthodox Church has totally different ideas on that. We believe all people go back to God. You might know this. We have a different definition of sin. We don't believe in the penal substitution of Anselm. Of that, believe in Jesus Christ, is of his form of dying for our sins. In that view, we don't have original sin. It's a whole different worldview, and I keep trying to point out, if people are going to attack something, if atheists are going to attack something, why deal with Bible verses that can be interpreted in different ways? Why not go just straight for the creeds, like the Nicene Creed or something like this? Not to mention that the compilation, the books that we have for the New Testament in the West, that the West has, not even the East has, is the earliest it's found is in the letter of Athanasius of Alexandria in 367 AD, and that even after that there's codices with the Shepherd of Hermas. Some of them don't have 2 Peter. The Bible is a very flexible thing, and this idea of the canon nobody really took it as the Bible. Had this idea before about 100 years before Gutenberg. I kept trying to explain this to Billzybobb, and that Christianity started off with Christ, that the Old Testament is basically giving the context for the New Testament, and that countless people in the early church said, you're not allowed to take that literally, you take that allegorically. Not to mention that biblical literalism, as pointed out by Big Lundy. He may have gotten this from me. I'm not going to take the credit, but I've said this constantly. He says it's only about 120 years old. I'd have to agree with him. I go a little bit further than that, and I can see pockets of it just after the Reformation, or the breakdown of the Reformation, after Calvinism, Lutheranism, and Anglicanism started fractioning and fractioning and fractioning. And I try to draw it back to, okay, what is historically has the church said through the ages? Let's not go by Bible or interpretation or anything. And it was even funny when he was arguing with Big Lundy. They were arguing about a passage of Mark, which isn't even original to the oldest copies of Mark, about, you know, moving mountains and handling snakes and all this kind of stuff. And saying, look, you can see that the church did exist. I mean, you read the New Testament, and atheists have pointed this out, how silly it is to read the Bible and go start a church, because the church, or the what we have called as the New Testament, which many of them are one-sided letters, Paul writing to the Corinthians. Well, the ones who really knew that were the Corinthians. Thankfully, we have people like Ignatius of Antioch, Polycarp, who were taught by the apostles, Clement of Rome, who's taught by Peter and Paul, and then from then we have people where we can trace all these things going back and what they believed and how they viewed this stuff. And we have ancient baptismal creeds. We have the Nicene Creed, which was from two ecumenical councils, the Council of Nicaea and Council of Constantinople. This goes right over his head. He takes a view that the Bible is dictation from God, there can be no interpretation, that Christians have always taken as literally true, and that the Bible has always been the most important thing in Christianity. Wrong. Flat out. I mean, history can bear this out to show that this is totally wrong. And I've even tried to say, well, no. Stop saying Christianity, just say the church and what it's believed. Because there's no Marcionites left, there's no Ebionites left. And go from there. But no. It's very funny that he called you a Nazi, a racist, and that you'd slit open a pregnant woman or something like that. Because I and many others who were atheists who stood up for me have gotten comments back from him calling me a spick, telling me to go back to Mexico. Yeah, I have South American heritage, but not Mexican. Arab, and I believe Sand Nigger was in there too. And there's people like Anon Free Zone, and I can name a lot of other people who had addressed him who were really not on my side, but saying, look, you can go after him this way, and then they come back with, you know, you cockroach-eating scum, you know, why don't you go listen to Cucaracha and take a bath, maybe your skin. I mean, it just disgusting stuff. It seems like you're trying to engage in a discussion with somebody who you're trying to act as this rational adult that you can get through to. Part of you may know this or not, part of my family is Roman Catholic, the other part was Sunni Muslim. I grew up learning about religions. Although religion wasn't really important to my parents, for identity's sake it was for me, so I started learning about it at an early age. I've read the Church Fathers, I became Eastern Orthodox. So these charges of racism or bigotry, I don't know if I could find a more bigoted or racist person than the person called Billzybobb or genericgod Killa or any of the other names that he goes underneath. And it was about a year before you and Cardinal Virtues got into all this stuff with Billzybobb that it was me and Gambler. And we even had atheists come to our defense, and they were considered as collaborators or conspirators or whatever, and that they were theists by proxy. Um, it's very odd that, okay, if you want to talk about Christianity and then argue from the Bible, it's not going to get anywhere. But if you're saying what Christians believed and that they've never believed in child sacrifice, they actually put a stop to the exposure of babies, um, and, and you can show all these things borne out in history and in writing, and that yes, Christianity did exist. And I give the example of it being a government, overseers called bishops. The entry into this organization is baptism. The sustaining part of it is going to worship and taking part in the Eucharist, along with other things, and that this isn't a wild dominionist view. This idea of dominionism was flat out rejected for the first 300 years, and he was even combated under when the Byzantines had become Christian. For example, Christ said, "My kingdom is not of this world. Render unto Caesar what Caesar's." And I actually had to tell him what heresy was, that Buddhists and Hindus aren't heretics because they don't claim to be Christians. They're not an aberrant form of Christianity. They're paganism. So from somebody who has had probably more experience with Billzybobb and more of his vitriolic hatred, because I think he's tried to tone it down with you and Cardinal Virtues, although it still comes out as very vitriolic, very uneducated, very bigoted, very mean, very stupid, very hate-filled. From somebody who's actually read the Church Fathers, who can actually argue from history and say, forget about the Bible for a second. Let's see what Christians had believed. You know, and I use the analogy of Greta Van Susteren picking up an English copy of an English interpretation of the Quran, maybe Muhammad Marbandu Pickthall, and then saying, oh, well, her view of how this is read, even though the surahs are not in order, and that you need the ahadith, the sunnah, to actually interpret what's in the Quran, let alone the tafsir, which is the biographies of Muhammad ibn Abdullah and the commentary of Ibn Kathir, and you know, and it goes on. I'm just naming the Sunnis, not even the Shia sources. Sahih al-Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, these things are needed. The Bible is not in context. The Bible was written for the church, by the church, within the church. You have parables, you have one-sided letters that we call epistles to different communities. You have the Apocalypse, which begins off as this is a book of signs and symbols. You have 4 different Gospels, John being to the Hellenized crowd or to the Greeks, Matthew, which is to the Jews, and people believe that there's a proto version of Matthew that was in the beginning, that was for the Ebionites who didn't believe Christ was God, but he was the Messiah. You had Mark, which almost has no parables in it, that just assumes that you knew the parables, and then you have Luke, which is kind of like for the Gentiles or for the people who don't have knowledge of this, and it goes through kind of a sweeping tell-all overview, and it flows into Acts. Even this, it's not in context. Nobody says, oh, this is in the Bible, this wasn't. Even the codices we find after Athanasius have Shepherd of Hermas in it, have the Epistle of Barnabas in it, some of them have the Didache, some of them don't have Jude, Hebrews, James, 2 Peter, 3 John. You're dealing with somebody who's severely undereducated, miseducated, and is only taking a very fundamentalist view. I don't have a problem with atheists. I do have a problem with proselytizing fundamentalists. You may know proselytizing is against Eastern Orthodoxy, but it's when people just start to say things that are so egregious, just egregious lies, or have no concept of history, who admittedly, I mean, I own probably about 5 books by Christopher Hitchens. I own 2 by Richard Dawkins. I've read them. I've read Harris's books. I've only read a few articles by Dennett, but I've seen almost every Christopher Hitchens debate, many Dawkins debates, many Harris debates, and a few Dennett debates. Billzybobb hasn't even done this. Not done his homework. It's becoming to be a broken record with me of just showing how these people aren't even worthy of the response. I wish you luck, but I'm getting to wonder, why are you even engaging with this person? This person who likes to call people bigots and Nazis, who's calling for, as Skeptical Heretic pointed out, the extermination of Christianity, when he doesn't even give a definition of Christianity, and calling people bigots and Nazis and racists, when he has said some of the most horribly racist and bigoted things, not only to me, but to other people who I wasn't even friendly with, but not friendly with, they weren't friends of mine, but they said, this guy is too wild. Other atheists have said this. People who oppose Christianity have said, this is just disgusting. So that's my message to you of I would say keep up the good fight, but this is falling on deaf ears. Do you actually believe that he's listening to what you have to say, processing it, and then coming out with an argument against it, or he's already got it planned out and that he's just throwing zingers? Because I made like 9 videos on my old channel trying to get him to realize even the slightest thing, and nope, it was just nope, it's no, you kill your child and this and that, or somehow if I wouldn't kill my child if God ordered me to, that I am a moderate or a liberal, or that I don't believe what the ancient Christians believed, even though biblical literalism, creationism, these things are all extremely new, just like the wealth, health, prosperity gospel. TheoWarner, take it easy. Again, my problem is not with atheism. That's why I really respect Skeptical Heretic, Cardinal Virtues, Big Lundy. It's the fundamentalism and the hatred and the bigotry that I think is wildly disgusting. So hopefully maybe me and you can talk on Skype sometime. If you want to record it, that's fine. I remember he tried to say he was a Muslim. When he found out that I had spent a great deal of my life in the masjids, because part of my family is Muslim, he backed off of that very quickly. But then I saw apparently his name on blog TV or Skype or something was Hassan Akbar, which I highly doubt that's his name. There's my name up there. Peace to you, TheoWarner. May God save Serbia and Syria. Take it easy. So it's not my very last name, so I can't get the trolls trying to track me down and stuff, even though they still try to. This debate that you got into with Billzybobb was one that was shown to me by Gambler, who is Eastern Orthodox. He's a friend of mine who we do roundtable discussions with David P. Witham. And talking to Billzybobb is like beating your head against a wall. There's no capacity for listening. And because Billzybobb kept trying to use the Bible as the Bible is Christianity or the Bible is God, this very Western view of God, the first video I made towards Billzybobb was commending him for attacking this very fundamentalist view of Christianity. I said, except this does not include the historic church. This does not include Eastern Orthodoxy. I can't say I believe in heaven or hell, because the Orthodox Church has totally different ideas on that. We believe all people go back to God. You might know this. We have a different definition of sin. We don't believe in the penal substitution. I would give my own personal views, or even politics, or going off subject of Eastern Orthodoxy, and I'd get people saying, like, John the Hut Dweller says this, he's a fucking idiot, this and that, which I'm not going to have be the one responsible for the slandering of saints' name who I actually respect and that my church actually venerates. So I came up with, I just put my own name, Yusefaltahir, which those names are part of my name. I come from a very ethnic background, so I have 3 last names. TheoWarner, this is Yusefaltahir at my channel. I had a channel formerly known, well, it's still up, I just didn't take it down, called John the Hut Dweller. As you may know, John the Hut Dweller was a 3rd century Christian. There were supposed to be 2 other people on there with me, so you have a singular name with a multiplicity of 3, an allusion to the Trinity. I stopped that for multiple reasons, one of them being I don't know what fruit this can possibly bear. I think you've had enough experience with them. The first video that I made on here was actually rational atheists are needed for people like Billzybobb. That's why I was so pleased to see people like Big Lundy, Cardinal Virtues, and Skeptical Heretic, even Coughlin and Noel Plum come out and say this guy's insane. I also want to give you some background information.